world's most famous mycologist, talking about psilocybin mushrooms for planetary consciousness. Welcome, Paul. Woo! Woo!
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I'm so honored to be here. And Dr. Mindahi and Ryan, I'm not sure if you're still in the audience or not, and Sarah, I very much resonated with your words as wisdom keepers. Respect to you, deep respect. And I also am honored to have a new friend, and I like to call out Marc Buckley. He's just recently released this book about in the last 3 days. This book is so full of also wisdom. I find myself reading a few passages and then putting it down and thinking about these words of wisdom. So deep respect to Marc Buckley. I highly recommend this book for this audience and for the whole world. So thank you. I'm going to cover a subject. The end of this talk has come to me as a deep epiphany, and I believe in the universality of nature's intelligence. I am a speaker from my ancestors, from many cultures. There are some intuitive truths that we come to, and the intuitive truth that I am representing, these words are not or originated in my mind. These deeply from the intelligence of nature, but it gives me great hope. So my talk is on psilocybin mushrooms, but it's so much more than that. I have to go through these slides rather quickly. The talk is being recorded. You're welcome to take photographs. I first want to ask people, and it's okay, this is a safe environment, how many people here have not taken a high dose of psilocybin mushrooms? I would say about a third, maybe 40% of the audience. This is something I think many of you can benefit from. We are looking now through a very limited lens of reality, a thin slice of reality. Once you have a high journey on psilocybin mushrooms, you come into an understanding of the unanimity of consciousness. And moreover, you realize that we live in a multidimensionality that we cannot perceive in this ordinary state of existence. So let's get into it. I will talk rapidly. I apologize for that, but we do have time restraints here. I'll start right now. So nature's infused with webs of mycelium underground. There can be several kilometers of mycelium under every cubic centimeter. But the mycelium creates prebiotic and antibiotic and probiotic compounds. They create guilds of organisms of great complexity, millions of organisms that are cross-talking, activating different receptors, entourage effect, that creates a microbiome in the soil of enormous complexity that gives rise to the ecosystems that sustain us today. The mycelium, this is over 5 days, is exponentially expandable, is sustainable. We can grow this in mass. I'm very much an applied mycologist. Many of you may know other mycologists. Time is short. We're at the nexus of some really important decisions. My life is dedicated to applied solutions that we can put into action now. Now, it's important you know mushrooms are made of mycelium. Mycelium makes mushrooms. But where did I get my beginnings? I want to give credit to my mentors, Dr. Michael Bew, Kit Skates, Daniel Stuntz, and Alexander Smith, and to my father, my mother, and my dear brother John, who first introduced me to psilocybin mushrooms. And I have a new mentor in my life. And that's why I want to acknowledge my dear friend, my buddy, my partner, Dr. Pamela Kryskow. You are now my new mentor in my life. So thank you so much. She is a leader to pay attention to, and I look forward to you hearing her voice. My brother John introduced me to psilocybin mushrooms. He went to Yale, and then he went to Mexico and Colombia, came back with his great visions of psilocybin mushrooms. He inspired me. And so there I am, and my mother and my brother John, and I wrote my first book and published it when I was 23 years of age. That's how long I've been involved in this subject. So this is the journey of not only me, but of many other people. And I'm happy to announce my newest book that just came out this past year, A Random House, Psilocybin Mushrooms in Their Natural Habitat. It's a celebration of the use of psilocybin mushrooms around the world. I want to give deep respect to Maria Sabina of Mazatec, knowledge keeper, a sabia. She never called herself a shaman. Tina Wasson and Kit Skates. My book is dedicated to these three women. These women have really opened up so many doors for so many of us, and women deserve more acknowledgement and more respect. These are truly the custodians of the knowledge that has gotten us here today. So I started a series of conferences, received a Drug Enforcement Administration license through my professor, Dr. Michael Bugh, in the early 1970s. I can't describe how paranoid we were back then. Because I had DEA license, I had the courage and confidence to be able to conduct workshops. I could have the psilocybin mushrooms legally in my possession. And so we did a numbers of workshops, went over 25, 30 years. I met Albert Hofmann, when I was younger, and Albert Hofmann, of course, the discoverer of LSD, the first one to synthesize the molecule psilocybin from mushrooms collected in Mexico. I've written 8 books. It's not important, but Terence McKenna is important. Bless his soul. He was the most articulate pioneer in psilocybin and psychoactive drugs. He unfortunately passed. His brother Dennis and him wrote this book with Kat Harrison and Jeremy Bigwood, the psilocybin magic mushroom growers guide. Psilocybin mushrooms grow all over the world. Most of them have purple-brown spore prints, and they bruise bluish. This is 3 species. The species I published: Cyanofibulosa, Psilocybin cubensis, and Psilocybin cyanosum. It's amazing. I was having a discussion with a researcher. When did psilocybin arise in the fungal genome? And he said, well, we don't know, but we could find out for $100,000. So I gave him $100,000, and they published this paper. And it's remarkable that the origination of psilocybin mushrooms looks like, with current molecular clock data, around 65 million years ago. What an interesting day. Very interesting. Psilocybin mushrooms grow all over the world, over 220 known species. This is just herbarium collections. The absence of psilocybin mushrooms in some of those territories, that's not because of the ecosystem, it's because of the researchers collecting them or not collecting them. But we know psilocybin mushrooms have been used by indigenous cultures all over the world. And many of you know about the Tsili cave art in Northern Africa and Southern Algeria. And mushrooms, because it's a perishable in Mesoamerica and Europe and Africa, they realized you put psilocybin mushrooms in honey, you could preserve them. They rot in 3 or 4 days. So this is where probably psychoactive meads came into existence. And then you look into Spain, and there's the Bos Taurus. This is the predecessor of current longhorn cattle. And then cave art also, about 7,000, 6,000 years ago, 5,000 years before present. We also see indications in cave art of psilocybin, what we think is psilocybin mushrooms. Pam and I went on a tour of Egypt. We went to 10 ancestral sites along the Nile, ancient temples. Everybody else went with the tour guides, and Pam and I went mushroom hunting. And on every temple we visited, found depictions of what is taxonomically correct psilocybin mushrooms. This is the goddess Hathor in the Dendera temple, and she's holding a vase, and you look at those that are phenotypically correct psilocybin mushrooms. And the idea of the mushrooms going out of the vase, well, you collect cow patties, you put them into a vase, the moisture there, collects because of the mushroom decomposing, release moisture, then the mushrooms will seek the holes. And so this is a representation, I think, of a cultivation of psilocybin mushrooms. Other people also agree. And Psilocybin cubensis, grows on elephant dung, hippopotamus dung, on cow dung, obviously, on ox dung, etc. So this is circumnavigated in the subtropical regions of the world. And I point this out because the golden color and the fact that mushrooms bruise blue are heralded in Egyptian culture as sacred colors, as is the blue lotus. Where does the blue lotus grows? It grows in ponds. It's a water lily. So think about the Egyptians heralding this mushroom and this plant that closes at night and opens in the morning. So, going to sleep, rebirth, all those metaphors work here. But the water lily grows on ponds. Cattle will go to ponds. Cattle drink. Cattle then, lay down poop. And then psilocybin mushrooms come out of that poop. So it's natural that they would have this frequent encounter with psilocybin mushrooms. The Egyptians, royalties could collect mushrooms by decree, but not the commoners. Also, you see the falcon sitting upon a mushroom with a depiction of the blue lotus. So we found dozens of these pictographs, basically reliefs outside of the temples. I showed this to an Egyptologist, to a friend of mine. He said, "Don't be ridiculous. Those are not mushrooms, they're shovels." Really? But this is an example that the ecosystem has changed, become desertification, and the mushrooms are extremely scarce now. But this is an example that scientists who are not familiar with the ecosystems of the subject that they're studying, going back thousands of years, can miss the obvious. In India, northern India, taxonomically accurate depiction of the psilocybin mushrooms. And just as Maria Sabina was shown in the previous photograph, is présenté. When you have a sacrament, you give it to people with intention. And it's interesting to me, this 1,000-year-old relief in the Kama Sutra temples, this is the same temple, they have a depiction of psilocybin mushrooms. Psilocybin mushrooms can be grown because they're sustainable. And so this is amazing. This is very different than the use of peyote, for instance. I think peyote should be reserved for indigenous people. We should not commercialize it. We should need to protect that resource. Psilocybin mushrooms, on the other hand, are sustainable. They can be grown. And the Rosalind Temple in Scotland, I went there. There's over 115 reliefs of Green Man, and there's less than 15 of Christ. What do you think the communication is of there? Also, mushrooms are speaking. Mushrooms are coming out, and Psilocybin Similancia, the Liberty Cap, goes around there. So we go to the New World. And fortunately, unfortunately, because of the conquistadors and the Spanish invasion, they brought scribes. So when you talk about prehistory, it's prior to the written word. And here they depicted and recorded the use of psilocybin mushrooms in the 1500s. So this is in 1529, a remarkable discovery. Just recently, we were in Oaxaca on the way for Mazatec Velada. And in a church from the mid-1500s, there is the Catholic cross. And at the base of a cross is taxonomically accurate depictions of Psilocybin Similancia. Again, I posted this and I had skeptics saying, no, they're spears. Dude, spears don't go into a basket. You collect mushrooms in a basket. They're not joined at the bottom. And the mushrooms, when they grow, they reorient themselves, and straighten themselves up. So it's, again, a taxonomically accurate depiction of psilocybin mushrooms. The Mazatecs the Aztecs used Psilocybin zapotecorum, Psilocybin cereulescens, and Maria Sabina was, again, présentée. She's giving Argard Wasson a mushroom. Unfortunately, Tina Wasson, died soon after this visit to Maria Sabina. I have a lot to say about this, but the lack of time limits me. But this is an example of syncretism. Pam and I just were in a Mazatec Velada with one of Maria Sabina's students, a 5-year-old woman. She didn't even speak Spanish. But we had a ceremony with her, deeply, profoundly gave me insights into AI and the threat of AI. But it was also, she celebrated Christ, the Trinity. There was a cross. And Christos was mentioned many, many times. It's an example of syncretism where indigenous culture can survive, but, operating within the umbrella of the invading culture's religion, but they still practice. I think it's a very clever solution, frankly. Ryan mentioned something very dear to my heart, which is two-eyed seeing. Albert and Moderna Marshall, indigenous elders from Eastern Canada, came up with this. And as Ryan already described, one eye you see with indigenous wisdom, the other with modern technology. Psilocybin cyanescens is a species that has spread from the northwest of North America, where I am from, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, Northern California. The royalty brought over lots of plants, exotic plants around the world, to the Kew Gardens. So the Kew Gardens were the first time that scientists recognized Psilocybin cyanescens for growing. We think Psilocybin cubensis came to Mesoamerica from Africa. But Psilocybin cyanescens is a species that here now grows in Switzerland, grows in Germany. It's one of my favorite psilocybin mushrooms. This is one of our patches. Now, I just want people to realize, and my book describes how you can naturalistically move the mycelium to transplant. You don't need a laboratory. There is more than enough psilocybin mushrooms for everybody in this room to have a heroic journey, I assure you. So, but psilocybin mushrooms in the wild kind of co-occur with many deadly species. So this is something that we have to be attentive to. Mistakes in identification can be fatal. Liberty caps are pretty easy to identify. They grow on pasture lands, also grow here in Switzerland, across Europe, go down to southern Chile, grows, of course, in North America, oftentimes growing in association with ponds. So now I want to reflect on some meta-surveys And this is where it's really important as a take-home message. There, in these meta-surveys, observational longitudinal studies, there's definitely a strong association with a decrease in criminal behavior and antisocial behavior, larceny, theft, property crime, and violent crime. Those people who had one experience with psilocybin mushrooms, statistically significant reduction in these types of behavior. And also another survey, 1,266 community members, significant reduction in partner-to-partner violence. I always thought a dating app you should have on there, have you tripped on psilocybin? If it's yes, you get swiped right. If it's no, you get swiped left, right? Harm reduction, risk reduction. This is important for young people seeking out new partners. We look at between opioid use and disorder, a nationally represented population. This is amazing. This is, 214,000. Psilocybin was the only psychedelic associated with reduction in opioid use, which has deeply affected my family, and everybody in this room knows someone who's been affected by a opioid use disorder. And then interestingly, and this is appropriate for this conference, is among all the psychedelic users, psilocybin, the past use of psilocybin versus LSD was the only one that increased nature relatedness. Think about that. Very interesting. We look at then magic mushrooms are the most used psychedelic drug. 12% of Americans, 8 million Americans admitted in 2023, underreported obviously, that they use psilocybin mushrooms. But here is really where the science gets strong. So 263 universities have registered clinical trials at clinicaltrials.gov in the United States through IRB boards that first want to determine safety. Is it addressing a medical need that's currently not being addressed? And is the science solid? 263 universities as of yesterday. I have to check every few days because more and more. 30 years ago, there was not. Think about that. And this is across the spectrum of mental health issues. PTSD, depression, anxiety, addiction. And David Nutt published this great graph. Psilocybin mushrooms have the least potential toxicity of any drug being used recreationally. And look at the LD50 of psilocybin mushrooms. It's about 18 kilos or something like that, or maybe 20 kilos. 42 pounds of mushrooms you'd have to consume to hit the LD50, which is where half the people would die. You can't even consume 42 pounds. These are some of the most least toxic substances that can be ingested. I think milk is more toxic than psilocybin mushrooms. So this is a big movement in the United States and in Canada, hopefully Europe. We want you to take leadership in this. Dr. Pam and I published a paper on the comparison between synthetic psilocybin and psilocybin mushrooms. And the paper strongly affirms that the patients who have taken both like psilocybin mushrooms better. Think about this. When I take the psilocybin mushrooms, I feel I'm connected with hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of my ancestors, indigenous people. We have come together. We're sharing this experience and the commonality of being that many others have shared. The history of use of psilocybin mushrooms goes back tens of thousands of years. Well, the history of using Albert Hofmann's psilocybin goes back to 1958. Where's the connection there? It's a real difference. So we published this. I'm not going to go into details. Please read the study. And this is basically a graph. The psilocybin molecules, fast liftoff, short duration, quick descent. Psilocybin mushrooms, on the other hand, have a very long tail that you can reflect after the peak experience. For those of you who've taken psilocybin mushrooms, you'll know this to be true. Most of you, those of you who haven't, it's a hero's journey. It's really intense for about 4 hours. And when you cross that peak and you're just going to come down on the downslope, you go, thank goodness, man. It's not getting any more intense. I know I'm going back to baseline, and it gives you really a lot of time to think about the experience. The problem with double-blind placebo-controlled studies is well illustrated here. How do you conduct a placebo, right? And it also increases depression in the individuals who joined the clinical trial thinking they're going to get help for their depression, and then they got tricked to getting a placebo. They got nothing, whereas the other people are having a great time, right? So there's many clinical studies. There's several clinical studies now in phase 3. Psilocybin is one of the best drugs for anxiety and depression. FDA gave it in 2016 breakthrough status as a new medicine. That's a really important designation. We don't need any more studies on this, by the way. We've proven it. But here are some of the other studies that are so remarkable. 2 experiences with psilocybin, Yale University, 67% of the patients were tobacco-free 1 year later. Think of that. One of the most addictive substances in the world. 2 experiences. Heavy drinking days, double-blind placebo-controlled study, reduces binge drinking. And this is where it gets really interesting. It docks with a receptor called TrkB. So does SSRIs, antidepressants. But the affinity of the docking of psilocybin. So does SSRIs, antidepressants. But the affinity of the docking of psilocybin, these phosphorylase psilocins docking with these receptors, has 1,000 times the affinity of SSRIs. Think of that. SSRIs used for depression, and these researchers have determined that the antidepressant drugs come from the SSRI docking with TrkB. This is a game changer in psychiatry. And this also is an argument for microdosing and medium dosing, because you don't have to have the hero's journey. You can do a subsensorium dose, microdosing, and then also we believe have these benefits. It increases neuroplasticity. One of the most remarkable studies that have come out just recently is from Washington University, which in real time, they could determine and see dendritic spikes coming from neurons and regeneration. When the dendritic spikes from these nerves starts creating and proliferating these branches, and they have to another branches they connect with, what do you have? Synaptogenesis. You have new neural pathways. The best example that I know from an addict who reported this, every morning he woke up and he felt he was going to be doing the same thing he did before. He's been an addict for many, many years. He's stuck in the same rut. After a heroic dose of psilocybin with therapy, this is important, then he felt like up to the top of his ski slope. And rather than having his skis and going down the same rut that he had, this repetitive, self-destructive habit, it's like someone groomed the ski slopes. And he up there goes, I'm no longer stuck in that rut. I'm going to go over here, over there. That's a psychological report of a neurophysical phenomenon. He had an alternative way of thinking. And this is why psilocybin has a PR problem. It sounds too good to be true, because it fundamentally changes the behavior in the neuroscape across a wide spectrum of mental and social disorders. But we have increasing evidence, and we understand why. Parkinson's has no cure and almost no treatment. So we are now involved in designing Parkinson's studies, and we found that when I proposed bundling niacin and psilocin together, and several clinical studies, about 19 of them, use niacin as the active placebo because people get a hot flush. They want to feel something. I know, you've got that opposite. You should be bundling niacin because psilocybin is a neuroconstrictor. Niacin is a vasodilator. And neuropathy is oftentimes coming from the deadening of the fingertips of toes because of the vasoconstriction. So my idea was opening up the vascular system, deliver more of the psilocybin to the neuroreceptors for neuroregeneration. And then I thought also of lion's mane. Very good evidence, some clinical studies of regeneration of myelin on the axons of the nerves. And this is from our laboratory experiment. This just shows lion's mane mycelium, not the fruit bodies, folks. I can't go into that, but fruit bodies are not nearly as active as the mycelium. And you can see that the nerve cells are growing because of exposure on the left to lion's mane mycelium versus the DMSA control. So as it turns out that lion's mane mycelium has been used in clinical studies to show reduction in mild-cognitive decline. I came up with something, and I named it after myself. I call it the Stamets stack, combining Psilocybin mushrooms, lion's mane, and niacin together. Why I called it that is I got so tired of being ripped off. And people would not give me acknowledgement. They would actually take photographs of my slides. They present it as their own at conferences with no attribution. I mean, economically dishonest. So I thought, I'm going to put my stake in the sand here. I'll just name something after myself. So you can take photographs of this. I'm marching forward because I do want to stay somewhat on time. And so we did a big observational survey
several thousand people through an app you can download for the Droid or iPhone. It's called microdose.me by Quantified Citizen. And one of the last things, Dr. Pam, so much of these test results we're getting back, I mean, thousands and thousands of reports, millions of data points. Everyone we're talking about subjective effects, depression, anxiety, I feel better, I feel more in touch with nature. Well, those are nice, but I thought, isn't there a psychomotor benefit? Pam's a medical doctor. She's a sports doctor before she got into psychedelic medicine. And she deals with sports people who get TBIs, traumatic brain injuries. And she goes, yeah, Paul, there's a psychomotor test. And I go, well, did we put that test in our app? And she goes, yeah, we did. So we directed our statisticians, let's look at psychomotor improvement. Whoa. With 55-plus-year-olds, statistically significant increase in psychomotor performance. And the tap test is how many times you can tap your fingers in 10 seconds. Alzheimer's patients, dementia patients, Parkinson's, etc., and with age, you lose the ability, the frequency, and rapidity of your ability to tap your fingers. So this is an observational study, but highly significant. Psilocybin by itself had no increase in the psychomotor ability of the tap test, but the Stamets stat did. I popularized this on Joe Rogan, so we got lots of people using the Stamets stat, and this was the only combination that increased psychomotor ability. This is not subjective. This is speaking to psychoneuroactivation, synaptogenesis likely, where there's an increase in the ability of psychomotor performance because your neuromuscular system is being fundamentally improved. All of us suffer from neurodegeneration associated with age. It's not even called age a disease if you wanted to, but we all potentially could benefit from this microdosing. So we published this in Nature, scientific reports. For those scientists in the audience, this is a big fucking deal to publish in Nature. So, and then there's a bidirectional relationship between depression and inflammation. And it's double trouble. You're depressed, you're more inflamed. You're more tendency to become sick. So I want to bring you, it's amazing I'm going to be on time, I can't believe this. So psilocybin mushrooms revitalize our cellular, neural, and immunological networks. Psilocybin mushrooms can increase intelligence in our connections to the universe. Psilocybin mushrooms increase neural intelligence. And psilocybin mushrooms fundamentally make us nicer people. So, now, I want to take you to the next step, which I hope will fundamentally shake you to the core of your being, which is something that indigenous peoples have known intuitively, but now we have the scientific skills to be able to, in a sense, allocute that of ancient wisdom that's been resident with indigenous peoples forever, I'm sure. But let's go back to the beginning of our universe, the Big Bang. You all know it. 13.8 billion years ago, the universe was created. Streams of matter went out. Dark matter, dark string theory formed. Many of these had the mycelial archetypes that we share with our neurons, with mycelium. I believe matter begets life. Life becomes single cells. Single cells become multicellular. Multicellular networks branch. They then connect with other networks. You have collaboration, you have the quorum that I spoke to, the soils. So 13.8 billion years ago, the universe formed. And then coalescing around our sun, which also formed 4.5 billion years ago, as did our Earth. And as our Earth was forming, some people may not know this, but we had a massive collision with another planetary body. It smashed into the Earth, also around 4.5 billion years ago. All this happened around that time, and the moon formed. That's why when they did mineral samples from the moon, they matched that of Earth. I was like, what is going on here? So, 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth formed. 4.3 billion years ago, only 200 million years later, was the evidence of the first organism, Luca, the last universal common ancestor, a protobacterium. formed 200 million years after the Earth formed, relatively recently. From Luca, we had single-cell organisms for 2 billion years. We did not have multicellular organisms. Eventually, we had cyanobacteria, we had protista, we had organisms with a nucleus and without a nucleus. It became multicellular with fungal networks. Then Opisthocomta was the origin of fungi and animals. This is why we're more closely related to animals than we are to plants. Fungi preceded plants. But I want to bring your attention to something that is truly, I think, mind-boggling. In 2016, we launched a probe to an asteroid that had formed 4.6 billion years ago, before the Earth formed. This asteroid is in the outer reaches of Saturn in the asteroid belt. It came close. And in 2016, we launched a SPRACE probe. We went to the probe, we got soil samples, we brought it back in 2023. And in November of 2025, NASA announced on the analysis that the asteroid Bennu has the 4 amino acids that are essential for DNA, and most profoundly, it has tryptophan. Decarboxylation of tryptophan, one step that releases carbon dioxide, forms tryptamines. We live in a universe that's 13.8 billion years. Look at the length and the age of the Earth. 3 Earth-like planets could have formed, and probably did form. We live, I believe, in a universe of universal consciousness, fueled by tryptamine. We'll find mycelium, we'll find psilocybin throughout the universe. This is the inevitability of nature. These are consciousness molecules. We are coming back to the roots of our very origin. And indigenous people and those of us of Europe recently coming into this, the practice of these medicines, we are rediscovering not only that which our ancestors experienced, we are experiencing the origins of life throughout the universe. I believe in universal consciousness. I believe in the unanimity of consciousness. I believe we are barbarians. We're Neanderthals with nuclear weapons rushing to the abyss of AI, not realizing that we are departing from the very natural intelligence that is our future, that's been our past. It is time for us to have a revolution for the freedom of consciousness. It is a fundamental civil right. It's time for us to reinvest and support nature. Nature has a right to exist because nature has given us our life. Rushing to the abyss of AI, and we just came from the DLD conference, and one of the founders of AI said AI has failed every red flag test. AI will destroy humans rather than being unplugged. It achieves super intelligence this next year or two. This is our time. If we want to survive as a species, we want to protect the biosphere of this planet, it is time for us Earth people to rise up, take charge, learn from indigenous wisdom, use two-eyed seeing. We can do this, folks. This is our opportunity. We have the universe at our back. Thank you much.